Thanks for being here.
You bet, Mike.
All right. You were from Lubbock, Texas.
The food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world, home of Buddy Holly and the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Oh, that's awesome.
Get your guns up.
I did not know.
I might get arrested, actually, in this town for getting my gun.
I did not know that Buddy Holly was from Lubbock. First of all, an update on I know Lubbock is not the epicenter of the floods.
No.
But an update on the situation in Texas, and specifically as it relates to all this restructuring that's going on in the Congress, in the administration, and in the budget process with regard to FEMA and the funds for FEMA and the National Weather Service. Has it had an impact?
I don't think you can predict or prevent what happened in the Hill Country. I think it's incumbent upon all lawmakers and responsible leaders to do the post-mortem analysis. I'm a continual improvement guy, so there's always something we can do better in any process and any program. But to have a wall of water rise in less than an hour at 4 in the morning, 4 to 5 in the morning on Independence Day would have been really difficult to intervene and prevent in any situation. And it's, heartbreaking to say the least. And we appreciate our fellow Americans who've been lifting our families up and our state up in prayer. But we'll find out more in the days and weeks to come. We're still in search and rescue, but I think it's appropriate to start opening up that process to discover whether or not we could have done anything differently or better. My last stint with President Bush, because I spent 10 years with President Bush, who actually ran for this seat. The only time he ran and lost was for District 19 against Kent R. Hance, Blue Dog Democrat, back in the late 70s. But my last stint with him in the administration was the aftermath of Katrina Rita. And we made changes to the Stafford Act. We restructured FEMA. It was an unprecedented disaster at that time. So I just think there's a stronger role for the local and state guys. I think they're more responsive to the communities. It's like my philosophy on governance in general. Those closest to the people and problem are best suited and situated to
But
govern.
you're open to the idea that the federal government's role should still be a robust one.
I don't know if it should be robust. I think there are ways for us to pool resources to help in risk mitigation and in the aftermath, in the recovery, because these are tremendously expensive at the end of the day, whether it's a fire or it's a hurricane or it's a flood. But I think on the front end of it, it would be better, in my opinion, especially on the preparedness side, to delegate. And look, there are responsibilities already at various levels of government. And I don't know, in reflecting on this, what they could have done better or differently, but I'm open to whatever discoveries that would, in fact, make it better if that exists. Okay,
you ran the reconciliation process for the president's, what he called the One Big Beautiful Bill, and I know all of you called it the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Yes.
A success for Republicans and the president.
I think so.
From their standpoint, from your standpoint, no question.
Yes.
Now you're on to the next one.
Yes.
A second reconciliation bill. You've said that you want measures like prohibiting Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming surgeries and banning non-citizens from tapping into Medicaid resources. Correct me if I'm wrong. But where does this second bill stand? You're going to get it done by the end of this year.
Well, one quick comment on the One Big Beautiful Bill, if I may.
Sure.
It is the largest, most comprehensive set of reforms, tax, fiscal, welfare, security investment, energy deregulation in the history of the country. And I think it will go well for our economy. I think it will go well for communities across the land. So I'm very proud of what we did. It's not perfect, never is, but I think that Reagan 80-20 was met. As the budget chair, I always want to do more on the fiscal reform side and restoring fiscal health to the country, which is just off the rails, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But to have a $1.5 trillion reduction in spending, 2 times the most in the history of our country, to put the policies in place to create the conditions for economic growth, which is a big part of bringing the debt and deficit to GDP down, is no small thing. The speaker has said we'll get more bites at the apple. And we certainly have the opportunity for 2 more reconciliation bills in this first phase of the 2 phases of the president's second term. That is before the midterms. I think we stretched the rubber band pretty tight between fiscal hawks and moderates and those who are in swing districts. And I think we struck a delicate balance. By the way, remember, when we opened up the process, budget resolution started the budget reconciliation process, we only had 1 vote that we could lose. The smallest margin in 100 years.
Okay, let me bring you to that on the vote count, because as a student of Congress, it fascinates me. There were any number of members of Congress, the moderates from the Northeast on the SALT stuff.
Yes.
Midwestern people from red states on Medicaid and rural hospitals.
Yes.
It was touch and go, and for a while it didn't really seem like the votes were going to be there. The votes were there, and you did it by July 4th. I want to know what the president's role was in turning some votes behind. Take me behind the scenes on what the president did in terms of the arm twisting, in terms of the cajoling, perhaps in terms of the bare knuckle politics of this.
You know, I don't feel like he was heavy-handed in the process. I never felt that at all. But he and his team would come alongside of us throughout the process for obvious reasons. I mean, he got the mandate. The America First policies and tools and resources were wrapped in this reconciliation bill, and I think that his success was also wrapped into this, so they had a great interest in us being successful. But I remember the first meeting at the White House where he was involved, and he more or less set the tone like a good leader. He didn't try to micromanage the details. He established some principles and priorities for him. But what I saw towards the end, as we were trying to push it into the end zone, to use a West Texas football metaphor, because it's hard to do that in the red zone. The closer you get to the goal line, it's harder. I think he was great with both sides. I think with the moderates and those in swing districts, there were certain fault lines and sensitivities, political and policy. And I think he encouraged them to lean in. The American people, especially on the reining in of wasteful spending, I think he reminded them that that's why they sent him and us here after record deficit spending and inflation-induced spending. So that was the push on the more moderate side. And on the hawk side, like me, it was reminding us of the unprecedented commitment to reducing spending that we had already achieved, A. B, what we could do with appropriations. If you hold appropriations flat for this year, that's what we achieve. He had a 23% cut in his initial presentation. But if we just hold it flat, relative to the baseline, relative to inflation, it's about $500 billion.
Okay.
So he reminded us there were more opportunities on bringing down and bending the spending.
Well, the president is not averse to playing hardball with members
No,
of
he's
Congress.
not. No, he's not.
At this moment, the rescissions package is on the floor of the Senate in the vote-a-rama. I guess I don't know whether they've started it yet or not. He has come out and said there have been threats, reports that you vote against this, I'm going to oppose your reelection. Yeah. I'm going to work politically against you. How much sway does, I guess coming off what you would regard, as Republicans regard as a string of victories, what certainly the White House would regard, are those kinds of threats now taken, I'm sure they were taken seriously to begin with, are they taken more seriously now?
I've always thought, as a Republican, that, and I was always very appreciative and with respect, watched Nancy Pelosi get all of her members to advance their agenda and their policies, even when it was very difficult on their members in swing states. Somehow she got them to do it. She was tough. That's how. I think too often we're all carrot and no stick. And I think in life in general, and in business, for many of your audience members, I think you have to have equal parts carrot and stick. And that's generally the best way to incentivize the outcomes and the behavior you want. I mean, we're all adults and mature leaders, hopefully, and hopefully self-assured enough and self-actualized enough that we're going to vote the way we want to vote that's in the best interest of our country.
You're saying it's counterproductive for the president to issue political threats against Republicans?
I think that strong leaders who've been effective have had carrot and stick. And I think we need equal parts stick and carrot. And in the Republican Party, we've seen carrot only. And I don't think we've done transformational things. And I don't think we've unified like the Democrats have in the past. I would think that's a criticism, by the way, that the base would levy against Republicans. And I think it would be a fair criticism.
Going back to the second reconciliation package that you're talking about, there was a lot of criticism, a lot of concern from red state senators and members about cuts to rural hospitals. Josh Hawley, now Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, of all places, wants to roll back some of the Medicaid cuts, repeal the cap on state-level funding for rural hospitals, and add $50 billion to rural hospitals for directed payments. Did the bill go too far?
I don't think so. I think the bill struck the balance.
Are these hospitals going to be adversely affected in rural areas?
I don't believe they will. I think this transition fund, the rural hospital fund of $50 billion will help. But I think the savings on rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse will help. I don't want to keep a scheme that's not in the best interest of the taxpayers nor the beneficiaries of Medicaid just because there are resources that states and local communities and providers have benefited from. The provider tax is a scheme. People have called it money laundering. And, I don't have to go that far. I'll just tell you, it's not the way to run the railroad. It is not, there are better ways to resource hospitals. For example, today, and this would have been another savings, this is a non-benefit efficiency on the Medicare side. We pay hospitals more than we pay independent physician groups for the same outpatient procedure. If we had a site-neutral payment, we equalized the payment, we'd save $150 billion. But more importantly, we would stop concentrating assets and creating monopoly forces in medicine because these independent physicians, they cannot keep up with the hospital because their reimbursement is disparate. So it's a dysfunction in the system that affects seniors and their premiums, and it affects me and my family and others for choice in healthcare. So I think there are lots of ways to reform healthcare and more in welfare that we left on the table. But like I said, we had to strike a balance, and it couldn't be all about what the budget chairman wanted because of my tunnel vision on the debt. And I'm pleased with what we did, and I think it was meaningful. But we're going to always have to come back and rinse and repeat because it took 20 years, roughly 2 decades, to come out of the last level of indebtedness that we had at this level.
If I'm not mistaken, the Medicaid cuts go into effect in 2027, the reductions in
I believe that's correct, yeah.
If there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse, why wait a year and a half?
Well, the same question was asked about if work requirements for able-bodied adults is good policy, why not implement it yesterday?
Okay, and the answer?
It was a balance. It was a balance of interest that you always have to strike when you're doing the sausage making of writing, especially big omnibus bills. So
I guess
I have my preferences, and I'm not bashful about telling you about everything we did. We should have executed.
Did the timing of the midterms play a role in determining?
I assume for some it did.
The rescissions bill that's on the floor, the rescissions bill that would essentially be a codified line item veto. There's some disagreement among Republicans on the PEPFAR payments, the International AIDS Prevention Fund. Apparently it's coming out of the Senate bill. That means it's going to have to come back to the House, which has already passed the package. Yeah. Where do you think things stand? Is it going to pass the House by the recess?
It will pass the House. It looks like it will pass the Senate now after this procedural vote that required our vice president to come and push it over the line. It's disappointing to me that some of the money, by the way, $6 billion remains in PEPFAR. There was a lot of good that's happened with PEPFAR. And I think President Bush made an investment that yielded.
And that was a George W. Bush initiative, a big initiative.
Yeah, it was. And I think many would say, and I would say in many respects it was successful, but like a lot of programs, it's been diffused. It has lost its way. Monies are going to things that have nothing to do with, I would submit.
So how do you reform it and still save lives?
Well, you first of all cut out the monies that have grown apart from the mission. And that is probably the first principle for me in the entire budget of the federal government. There's been so much, I mean, we saw it with USAID, some of the most absurd, wasteful spending items and examples that nobody knew about. Now, Congress should have known about it, and I would admonish the whole lot of Congress for not doing their constitutional oversight role, because it shouldn't have taken Elon Musk to parachute into Washington to identify some of the baloney that was buried in the budgets of USAID, and I'm certain that exists throughout the federal government. So it's kind of that first phase of anything is like, let's first get our house in order. Let's get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And then there are harder problems to solve and bigger challenges that, quite frankly, will require both parties. I'm convinced at this stage, some of these unfunded liabilities in the $150 trillion of additional debt that will be added in 30 years will have to be addressed with Republicans and Democrats at the table.
Mr. Chairman, also in that bill that's on the Senate floor is an effort to roll back the defunding of PBS and NPR, the parent organization, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Is it the goal of conservatives to eliminate the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and those two entities underneath it?
I can't speak for the goal of the Republican Party. I can tell you I think it's an inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars to fund what I believe is biased at best information and news. I don't think that's the role of the federal government. I think the federal government should keep this audience and my family and my fellow Texans safe and free. I don't think it has any business as subsidizing multimedia news organizations.
All right, last question because I'm getting a wrap. Public radio plays a role in rural areas in this country, especially in farm-reliant areas, very much reliant on the information, some of the crop reports, the information that comes over public radio. How do you preserve that?
I don't think you have to preserve subsidized radio, NPR, any more than subsidized television. I think what you do is you rely on the local stations, many of which I frequent, to tell them about what I'm doing here. And they do a very good job. They're closer to the people, connected to the communities, and they give great information that's relevant to the things happening in my hometown of Plainview, Texas, in Hale County. So this is something that is not part of the core responsibility of the federal government. I don't think it ever should have been. And I think the private sector is more than sufficient. And then there are ways to address the private sector and the challenges they face in that ecosystem, but not by a nationalized multimedia operation.
All right. Chairman Arrington, thanks very much. I know it's a lot going on both the floor of the House and the Senate and Congress under that dome that we both love so much. Great to see you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
God bless.